بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. Returning back to our few minutes spending with some of the statements of Imam al-Suyuti. We discussed that which has occurred in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from those ayat and the relation of the ayat one to another, and likewise we've discussed that which is related to the beginnings of the surah and the ends of the surah, and the fact that from the eloquent address is that which is known as bara'atul istihlal, يعني that the one who addresses you, he begins with a general statement that encompasses the topic of his mawdu' or the topic of his address, and then the rest of that which he has to say in detail follows that general introduction. And we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the surah of the Quran, there are many examples of that bara'atul istihlal, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins the surah oftentimes with a mention of that which is generally related to the topic of the surah, and then the rest of the surah is a clarification of that. In this session, inshallah, we're going to sit and discuss something from another one of the wujuh of i'jaz, or one of the aspects in which the Quran is miraculous in its manner of addressing mankind and in its manner of addressing the believers. That which is related, ikhwan, to the mushkila or to the issue of at-ta'arud, or that which is apparently contradictory from the ayat and the manner in which the ayat clarify one another. For indeed, it is only ignorance that leads a person to believe that there is contradiction in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah Azza wa Jal had mentioned, وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. That if it was from other than Allah, they would have found within it much contradiction. But alhamdulillah, because of the fact that it is from Allah Azza wa Jal, without doubt, no doubt that which people conjecture and believe to be contradiction is clarified, ikhwan, by verses in places or other places within the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bihamdillah. In that regard, we have a narration, ikhwan, that was collected by the Imam Abdul Razak ibn Hammam al-San'ani in his tafsir, who mentioned his isnad going back to Sa'id ibn Jubayr, who mentioned جاء رجل إلى ابن عباس, that indeed a man came to Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما فقال أرأيت أشياء تختلف علي في القرآن. He said, indeed, do you not see that there are certain ayat, there are certain verses that I have a problem with in the Quran. فقال ابن عباس, so Ibn Abbas said, ما هو أشك? He said, what is it? Is it doubt that you have? He said, no. ليس بشك ولكنه اختلاف. He said, it is not shak, it is not doubt that I have, but indeed it is a problem that I have, is something that is ambiguous. So he said, Ibn Abbas, he said, حاتي ما اختلف عليك من ذلك. So he said, bring to me or mention to me that which you have a difficulty understanding from that. So he said that indeed I hear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, ثم لم تكن فتنتهم إلا أن قالوا والله ربنا ما كنا مشركين. The statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wherein Allah mentions on Yawm al-Qiyamah that their fitna on Yawm al-Qiyamah is that they will say, oh Allah, by you, we were not mushrikeen. And then we find in other places in the Quran, the same question he mentions, their statement, or the statement of Allah, وَلَا يَكْتُمُونَ اللَّهَ حَدِيثًا. And indeed, they will not hide anything from Allah. So here in one ayah, we have them mentioning, وَاللَّهِ رَبِّنَا مَا كُنَّا مُشْرِكِينَ. Wallahi, by Allah, we were not mushrikeen. And then in another place, we hear Allah Azza wa Jal mentioning that indeed they will not hide anything from Allah. And then he mentioned, and I likewise hear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, فَلَا أَنْسَابَ بَيْنَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَلَا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. That there will be no lineage, no bonds of kinship between them on that day, neither will they question one another. And then he mentioned, but in other places or in another place, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, وَأَقْبَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. But they will turn to each other, asking and questioning each other. So here, we hear Allah Azza wa Jal mentioning, there is no lineage between them on the day of Qiyamah, neither will they question each other about each other. And then we hear in another place, but they will turn to each other questioning, yani each other. He mentions, I likewise hear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning, أَإِنَّكُمْ لَتَكْفُرُونَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَ الْأَرْضَ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ. Do you indeed disbelieve in the one that has created the earth in 2 days? And then the ayat go on to mention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned to the heavens after that and created them. Naam. So he said, but then in another verse, Allah mentions, أَمِ السَّمَاءَ بَنَاهَا. Or are you more, يعني أَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمِ السَّمَاءَ بَنَاهَا. Are you more difficult to create, or the heavens that Allah has constructed? And then Allah goes on to mention, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا. And then after that, Allah spread the earth out. So in the first verse, it appears that the earth was created first, and then the sama. Whereas in the second verse, it appears that the sama, the heavens were created first, and then the earth. So then he says, and likewise I hear Allah Azza wa Jal mentioning, كَانَ اللَّهُ, that Allah was. So he says, what is it? And what is the affair of Allah saying that He was? That Allah was غَفُورٌ مَثَلًا وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. That Allah was oft forgiving, most merciful. Why does Allah say He was oft forgiving, most merciful? So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he responded by saying, as far as your statement concerning the statement of Allah that their fitna was not anything other than the fact that they said, by Allah we were not mushrikeen. He said, فَإِنَّهُمْ لَمَّا رَوَأُوا الْعَذَابِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ لِأَهْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ وَيَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبِ وَلَا يَغْفِرُ الشُّرَكَاءِ وَلَا يَتَعَاظَمَهُ ذَنْبٌ أَنْ يَغْفِرَهُ. He mentioned that when they see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يعني يوم القيامة, that Allah Azza wa Jal will forgive the people of Islam, and that Allah will forgive the sin, and that Allah does not forgive the sin of those who commit shirk, and Allah does not deem any sin great enough not to forgive it, yani other than shirk. The mushrikeen at that point will deny that they were mushrikeen, hoping that they will receive something from the mercy that they witness at that point, yani from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is when they will say, Wallahi Rabbina ma kunna mushrikeen. That is when they will say, by Allah, we were not mushrikeen. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will seal their mouths, and their hands, and their arms, and their limbs, and their feet will speak. And that is at that point, yani their feet will utter all of that which they used to do. And that is the point wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَلَا يَكْتُمُونَ اللَّهَ حَدِيثًا, that they will not be able to hide anything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So initially, yani the gather between those two verses is that initially when they see that Allah Azza wa Jal is forgiving the sin, forgiving Ahlul Islam, forgiving those who did not commit shirk, they will attempt to hide that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their shirk, hoping to receive something from that mercy, saying, Wallahi, oh Allah, we were not mushrikeen. Then Allah will seal their mouths and let their limbs speak, and at that point, لا يكتمون الله حديثا, indeed, they will not be able to hide anything from Allah. He said, as far as your statement concerning the statement of Allah, فَلَا أَنْسَابَ بَيْنَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَلَا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ, that there is no lineage between them, neither will they question one another. He mentioned, فَإِنَّهُ إِذَا نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَصُعِكَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا مَنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ فَلَا أَنْسَابَ بَيْنَهُمْ عِنْدَئِذٍ. He mentioned that concerning that statement, when Allah, or when the command to blow in the horn takes place, and when everyone falls unconscious, everyone in the heavens and in the earth, then there is no lineage between them at that time. Then he mentions, ثُمَّ نُفِخَ فِيهِ أُخْرَى, then it will be blown into a second time. فَإِذَا هُمْ قِيَامٌ يَنْظُرُونَ, and they will be standing, looking. وَأَقْبَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ, and then they will turn one to another questioning. So here we find, ikhwan, again there is no contradiction. As far as there being no ansab, no lineage between them, and neither will they question each other, that is when the horn is blown. And that is when they fall unconscious, everyone in the heavens and the earth. And then when the second horn is blown, and they're raised looking, at that point they will turn to each other, questioning each other concerning this affair. As far as your statement, he continues, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth in 2 days. And then, that Allah created the earth in 2 days. He said that the heavens were created before that. وَكَانَتْ السَّمَاءُ دُخَانٍ. But the heavens were smoke. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned them and created them into 7 heavens. فِي يَوْمَيْنِ, in 2 days. After creating the earth. So they were smoke. Allah created the earth. And then He turned them into 7 heavens after creating the earth. And as far as your statement concerning the statement of Allah, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا, that the earth after that He spread out, He said, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making and placing within it jibal, يعني وأنهار, mountains and rivers and trees, والبحار, and oceans. So He explained the fact that there is no contradiction. Both of them, يعني Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens, then they were smoke. Allah created the earth, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after creating the earth, turned the heavens into 7 heavens. Thereon after, He spread the earth out and created that which is upon earth from mountains, from trees, from rivers, and from oceans. And then He went on to mention, as far as your statement, كان الله فإن الله كان ولم يزل كذلك. He said, as far as your statement that Allah was, He said, indeed Allah was, and He has not ceased being so. وهو كذلك عزيز حكيم عليم قدير ثم لم يزل كذلك. That He is likewise Aziz, Hakeem, Alim, Qadir, يعني has wisdom, knowledge, ability. He was, and He has not ceased being so. So even though Allah Azza wa Jal said, and Allah was, and oftentimes that is something that relates, ikhwan, to those issues, mathalan, that Allah discusses a story, or Allah discusses an occurrence and says, and Allah was Ghafur Rahima, Allah was oft forgiving, most merciful, يعني at that point, or in relation to that thing, but that does not mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala no longer is. He was then, He was before that, and continues to be so, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma said, فَمَا اخْتَلَفَ عَلَيْكَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ فَهُوَ يَشْبَهُ مَا ذَكَرْتُ لَكَ. So that whatever occurs to you and is ambiguous to you from the Qur'an, then it resembles that which I have mentioned to you. So for indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not revealed anything. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَنْزِلْ شَيْئًا إِلَّا وَقَدْ أَصَابَ بِهِ مَا أَرَادَ. Allah has not revealed a thing except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended by it. Yani that was the reason it was revealed. It was revealed to establish that which Allah intended. But then He mentions, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But unfortunately most of the people, لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Most of the people do not know. Yani, and that no doubt is in reference to those verses that may be ambiguous or unclear, that many of the people do not know, and that no doubt, ikhwan, is and establishes the importance of al-ilm. Another one of the manners, or another one of the wujuh in which the Quran, ikhwan, is يعني miraculous. And of course, ikhwan, Imam al-Suyuti, we do not find in his discussion of those things that are miraculous, we don't find that which we commonly find in the modern day books concerning the miracles of the Quran. In the modern day books concerning the miracles of the Quran, generally, يعني 99.9% of them discuss the affair of the scientific discoveries and the miraculous nature in which the Quran is in accordance with science and so on. No doubt those things are recent events. So Imam al-Suyuti is discussing that thing which establishes the miraculous nature of the Quran for those ikhwan, before science. For those from amongst Ahlul Ilm who have reflected upon the Quran and that which is present within it from wording and construction and so on, and discuss ikhwan, the beautiful meanings and that which establishes that it could not have been except from the Lord of all the worlds. He mentions, as it relates to the affair of this ikhtilaf, or this differing that occurs in between verses, or that which apparently appears to be contradictory, he mentions that occurs for a number of reasons. Sometimes this affair or this thing occurs because of the fact that the thing itself has gone through different stages. So sometimes Allah mentions it on the basis of one of its stages, as it relates, for example, to the creation of Adam. Sometimes we have the mention of Adam being created from clay, sometimes from dirt, sometimes from a dust-like substance, and so on. All of these references, ikhwan, are references to earth. Asl of those references returns back to turab, returns back to earth. But the difference that Allah has used is a reference to the differing states that thing may go through. Similarly, as it relates, for example, to the staff of Musa, when it turned into a snake, that Allah Azza wa Jal in some ayat referred to it as a thu'ban, as a snake, which is a larger snake. And then in another place, Allah mentions تهتز كأنها جان, that it shook and trembled as though it was a jan. And the jan here is a reference to a smaller snake, not a reference to a jinn, but to a smaller snake. So here, even though we have the mention of a thu'ban, a larger snake, and then a jan, which is a smaller snake, here Allah mentions that which is related to snakes. The first of them being the description of the snake, the thu'ban, which is a large snake. And as far as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning تهتز كأنها jan, that it shook and trembled as though it was a jan, that is in relation to its movement, the movement of the snake, that it trembled as though it was one of those smaller snakes, even though it was a bigger snake. So there's no contradiction between Allah mentioned or referring to it as a jan here and a thu'ban there, this referring to what type of snake it resembled, and that referring to the movement that it took on when it trembled. Similarly, sometimes we have a contradiction or an apparent contradiction in regards to that which is related to the mawdu' or to the topic of those verses. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in some verses mentions وَقِفُوهُمْ إِنَّهُمْ مَسْئُولُونَ, stop them, for indeed they are to be questioned. This is in reference to Yawm al-Qiyamah. And Allah likewise mentioned فَلَنَسْأَلَنَّ الَّذِينَ أُرْسِلَ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَنَسْأَلَنَّ الْمُرْسَلِينَ, that indeed we shall question those who had messengers sent to, and we shall likewise question the messengers. So here we have Allah establishing that people on Yawm al-Qiyamah will be questioned. The kuffar, they'll be questioned. And those who the kuffar were sent to, they'll be questioned. But then in other places we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention فَيَوْمَئِذٍ لَا يُسْأَلُ عَنْ ذَنْبِهِ إِنسٌ وَلَا جَانٌ. On that day, no one will be questioned concerning his sin, not a person, not a human being, or a jinn. So the scholars, they respond to the likes of these verses by saying, as far as the first verses about them being questioned, stop them, for indeed they will be questioned, then they are in response or in reference to Tawheed, and in reference to them believing in the messengers, and likewise in reference to them acknowledging that which the messengers came with. And as far as the other verses, then no doubt, as far as the other verses are concerned, then this is in reference to them having an excuse for their sin, that they will not be questioned concerning what excuse they have for committing those sins. So when Allah Azza wa Jal mentions فَيَوْمَئِذٍ لَا يُسْأَلُ عَنْ ذَنْبِهِ إِنسٌ وَلَا جَانٌ, on that day no man or jinn will be questioned about his sin,
the reference, or that is a reference to them not being questioned about what excuses or what hujjah they had for committing those sins. So there is a difference between the two verses. These verses refer to them being questioned about Tawheed, following the messengers and so on, whereas the last verses is that they will not be questioned concerning them having an excuse for doing and committing the sins that they committed. Likewise, we have another example of that, the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ. O ye who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and do not die except that you die as mu'mineen, or as believers, as Muslimin. In another verse, we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah as much as you can, as much as you're able. So in these, how do we understand the likes of these two verses? As far as the first set of verses, fear Allah as He should be feared, and do not die except that you die as believers, then this verse is in reference to Tawheed, as Ahlul Ilm they mention. Fear Allah as He should be feared, establish the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as far as the second verses, when Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah as much as you are able, that is in relation to when you carry out the actions. That when you carry out the actions, fear Allah as much as you are able in regards to your carrying out of those actions. And some of the scholars, they hold that the second verse abrogates the first verse. From amongst Ahlul Ilm, the Mufassirun, there were those who held that فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah as much as you can, abrogates fear Allah as He should be feared. Similarly, another example of that is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَنْ لَا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. That if you fear that you are not able to do justice, then, between your wives, then take one, or that which your right hand possesses. And then in another place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ النِّسَاءِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ. And you will not be able to do justice between your wives, between women, even if you're able, even if you are ardent. And this, ikhwan, we find many, an individual who seeks to negate the legislation of polygamy in Islam and in the Quran by saying, see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the same surah nullifies the permissibility of taking another wife. Why? Because Allah mentions that فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا, if you fear that you will not be able to do justice, then take one. And then in this verse, Allah mentioned that you will never be able to do justice. Meaning, it's not permissible for you to take another wife. And that is not the intent, no doubt, as Imam Suyuti clarifies, for indeed, the first verse is in relation to that which a person is able to do justice in the time, in provisions, in housing, and so on. And as far as the second verse is concerned, then the second verse is in relation to the inclination of the heart. That you will not be able to control the manner in which or which way your heart is going to incline. And which of your wives your heart is going to incline towards. Even if you're ardent in trying to do so. So the first one is in regards to that which is in your hands. Those things that you have in front of you and you're able to do justice in. And the second verse is in relation to that which occurs and comes to one's heart from love and inclination towards one of his wives over and above the other. So that in and of itself is something that is out of that person's hand. The inclination of his heart is out of his hands, but he has been commanded to do justice in regards to those things that are in his hands, and he's able. Similarly, in regards to the statement of Allah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ, that indeed Allah does not command with fahsha. Allah does not command lewdness, does not command evil. But in another verse, Allah mentions that when we intend to destroy a people, أَمَرْنَا مُتْرَ فِيهَا فَفَسَقُوا فِيهَا. When we intend to destroy a township, we command its evildoers, its oppressors, and they فَسَقُوا فِيهَا. They carry out atrocities in those villages. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala apparently is commanding with that which is evil. But the first verse, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ, Allah does not command fahsha, يعني does not command evil that is in regards to Allah's legislation. The amr al-shar'i. The amr al-shar'i. In regards to the amr al-shar'i, Allah does not command with that which is lewd and evil and untoward. But as far as the second verse is concerned, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that we command its oppressors to create corruption in that land, that is in regards to the amr al-kawni, yani Allah's universal command. That is, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees that those individuals create fasad in that land. Not that Allah Azza wa Jal legislates that upon them, but that Allah Azza wa Jal decrees that for them. So ikhwan, those verses that appear to be contradictory, no doubt, with returning those verses back to the clear ayat, it becomes crystal clear, ikhwan, that alhamdulillah, those verses, all of them either clarify one another, or that there are other verses, ikhwan, that indicate that those verses, for example, are abrogated, or that the topic is a different topic and not the same as the topic of the verses that are apparently contradictory. And inshallah on that note we round up. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.